I'll create the HFY story directly in the response. This is a creative writing task that doesn't require creating a document file. I'll write all 5 parts as requested. The Zelthari High Council had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their fleet of silver warships patrolled every sector, collected tribute from every inhabited world, and crushed any species that dared to challenge their authority. The other races, the insectoid Krix, the aquatic Diluvians, the crystalline Vorathi, all bent the knee to the Zelthari or faced extinction. This was the natural order. This was how things had always been. Ambassador Corrin stood on the observation deck of the Council's flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars drift by. His gray skin showed the marks of his 200 years of service. His 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated face, had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen rebellions. Each one had ended the same way, with Zelthari plasma cannons reducing entire planets to ash. "Another transmission from the frontier," his assistant said, holding out a data pad. "The scouts report unusual activity in the uncharted region." Corrin took the pad with one of his 4 arms and studied the readings. "What am I looking at, Telin?" "We are not certain, Ambassador. The scout ship detected radio signals from a star system we had classified as uninhabited. The signals are organized, patterned." "A new species." "It appears so. They call themselves humans. They come from a world they call Earth." Corrin felt a familiar sensation, the mix of curiosity and mild annoyance that came with discovering yet another primitive civilization. The galaxy was full of them. Young species just learning to reach beyond their homeworlds, not yet understanding that the Zelthari own the stars. "What do we know about them?" "Very little. They have achieved basic space travel. Their technology appears to be several centuries behind ours, perhaps 1,000 years at most." Corrin made a gesture of dismissal. "Standard procedure then. Send an envoy, explain the terms of tribute. If they refuse, send a punishment fleet. They will learn their place." It was the same process the Zelthari had followed 1,000 times before. Some species accepted their fate quickly. Others required persuasion. A few had to be made examples of. But in the end, every species that survived in the galaxy served the Zelthari. The envoy ship departed 3 cycles later. Corrin thought nothing more of it. He had more important concerns. The Krix were growing restless again, and the Diluvians had requested a reduction in their tribute payments. The business of empire never stopped. 2 cycles passed before the report came back. Corrin was in his private chambers when Telin burst through the door, his eyes wide with what could only be described as panic. In 200 years, Corrin had never seen his assistant display such emotion. "Ambassador, the envoy ship has returned." "That was fast. Did the humans accept our terms?" Telin's mouth opened and closed several times before he could form words. "Ambassador, you need to come to the command center. Now." The command center of the Eternal Dominion was a vast circular room filled with holographic displays and communication arrays. When Corrin entered, he found the entire senior staff gathered around the central projection table. Their faces showed expressions he had never seen before: confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. "Report," Corrin commanded. Admiral Veth, commander of the 6th Battle Fleet, stepped forward. His voice was unsteady. "Ambassador, the envoy delivered our standard terms to the human government. They refused. Then we dispatch a punishment fleet. This is not complicated, Admiral." "Ambassador, we did. We sent 40 ships from the frontier garrison, standard suppression force." "And?" Admiral Veth swallowed hard. "The humans destroyed them." Silence fell over the room. Corrin waited for someone to laugh, to reveal this was some kind of joke. No one did. "Explain," Corrin said slowly. "The fleet arrived in the human system 3 cycles ago. They were met by a human defense force. The engagement lasted less than one rotation. Admiral Veth's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Ambassador, none of our ships survived. The humans captured the command recordings from wreckage. They sent them back to us." The holographic display activated, showing the battle from the perspective of a Zelthari cruiser. Corin watched in growing horror as human ships, blocky, angular vessels that looked nothing like the elegant curves of Zelthari design, tore through his people's formation like predators through prey. The Zelthari ships fired their plasma cannons, the same weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds. The human ships simply moved. They dodged and weaved through the plasma fire with impossible speed, then returned fire with weapons Corin did not recognize. Beams of focused light cut through Zelthari shields as if they were not there. Missiles detonated against hulls with devastating force. The entire battle lasted 17 minutes. 40 Zelthari warships, crewed by over 12,000 soldiers, reduced to floating debris. "This is impossible," Corin breathed. "Our intelligence said they were centuries behind us in technology." "Ambassador," Admiral Veth said carefully, "I believe our intelligence was wrong." Over the next several cycles, more information came in. The human government had sent a formal communication to the Zelthari Council. Corin read it 3 times, unable to believe the words on the screen. The message was brief. It stated that humanity did not recognize the authority of the Zelthari High Council. It stated that the Terran Federation, as they called their government, claimed sovereignty over its own territory and would defend that territory against any aggression. It invited the Zelthari to send diplomatic representatives if they wished to establish peaceful relations. It did not apologize for destroying the punishment fleet. It did not ask for mercy. It did not beg for terms. "They have no idea who they are dealing with," said Counselor Zeth, one of the oldest members of the High Council. Her scales had faded to a pale gray with age, but her mind remained sharp. 40 ships. We have 40,000. Let us remind these humans of their place in the galaxy." The other counselors nodded in agreement. This was the traditional response, overwhelming force. It had worked for 12,000 years. There was no reason to believe it would not work now. But Corin felt a cold sensation in his chest. He had watched those recordings many times now. He had seen the way the human ships moved, the precision of their attacks, the calm efficiency with which they had dismantled a Zelthari battle group. These were not the actions of a primitive species blundering into a fight they could not win. These were the actions of warriors who knew exactly what they were doing. "Counselor," Corin said carefully, "perhaps we should gather more intelligence before we commit a larger force. We clearly underestimated them once. If we do so again—" "You suggest we show weakness?" Counselor Zeth's eyes narrowed. "You suggest we let a minor species defy us without consequence. Do you know what would happen if the Crix heard of this? If the Diluvians learned that a primitive species had destroyed our ships and lived?" "I suggest caution, Counselor, nothing more." "Caution is the refuge of cowards. We will assemble the Grand Fleet, 500 ships. We will travel to this human homeworld and burn it to ash. And when we are done, we will broadcast the recordings to every corner of the galaxy so that all will remember the price of defiance." The decision was made. The Grand Fleet began to assemble at the frontier staging grounds. 500 warships, the largest military force the Zelthari had deployed in 3 centuries. It was enough firepower to crack planets, to boil oceans, to reduce entire civilizations to radioactive dust. Corin watched the preparations with growing unease. He had requested all available intelligence on the humans, and what he had learned troubled him deeply. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel about 200 years ago, a blink of an eye by Zelthari standards. In that time, they had expanded to colonize nearly 40 worlds. Their population had grown to over 50 billion, but it was not their numbers that worried Corin. It was the reports of their history. Humanity, it seemed, had spent most of its existence at war with itself. For thousands of years, before they had even reached beyond their homeworld, humans had been fighting one another. They had developed weapons of terrible power, weapons designed not for conquest but for complete annihilation. They had come close to destroying themselves many times. And then somehow they had survived. They had united, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. They had turned the aggressive instincts that had once driven them to kill each other outward into the cosmos. The scout reports described human military exercises. Their ships did not simply fly in formation. They practiced maneuvers of incredible complexity, adapting to unexpected situations in real time. Their commanders had studied war their entire lives, drawing on centuries of military theory and experience. The Zelthari had not fought a real war in 600 years. They had crushed rebellions, yes. They had punished defiant species, but they had not faced an enemy that could truly fight back. Until now. The Grand Fleet departed for human space with 500 ships and over 200,000 soldiers. The commanders were confident. The counselors expected a quick victory. The rest of the galaxy watched and waited to see what would happen when the masters of the galaxy met these strange, new creatures called humans. Corin watched the fleet disappear into hyperspace and felt a terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human home system. Admiral Keth, commander of the entire force, surveyed the tactical displays with satisfaction. 500 ships arranged in perfect formation, their plasma cannons charged and ready. Before them lay a single star orbited by a handful of rocky planets. "Report on human defenses," Admiral Keth commanded. "Scanning now, Admiral." The sensor officer's voice was confident. "We detect multiple orbital stations around the third planet, the human homeworld they call Earth. Approximately 150 defensive vessels in the system, various sizes and configurations. 3-to-1 odds in our favor. Excellent. Begin approach. Standard conquest formation." The Zelthari fleet moved forward, weapons hot. Admiral Keth had read the reports about the first engagement. He had watched the recordings. He believed the humans had simply gotten lucky, a combination of surprise and local knowledge that would not help them against a proper battle fleet. He was wrong. The first sign of trouble came when the long-range sensors detected movement, not from the human homeworld, but from behind the fleet. "Admiral, multiple hyperspace signatures appearing at our rear." Admiral Keth spun around to face the display. Where there had been empty space moments before, ships were now emerging from faster-than-light travel. Human ships, hundreds of them. "How is this possible? They appeared out of nowhere." "They must have been waiting in hyperspace, Admiral. They tracked our approach and timed their arrival to catch us from behind." It was a tactic the Zelthari had never encountered. Their enemies had always fought defensively, trying to protect their homeworlds. No one had ever had the audacity, or the capability, to ambush a Zelthari battle fleet. Before Admiral Keth could reorganize his formation, the humans attacked. The human ships moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They did not advance in straight lines or simple patterns. They flowed around the Zelthari fleet like water around stones, their movements unpredictable yet perfectly synchronized. Smaller ships darted in to strike at vulnerable points while larger vessels provided covering fire. And their weapons. Corin had warned the Council about the human weapons, but his warnings had not prepared the fleet for the reality. Railguns launched projectiles at incredible velocities, punching through Zelthari armor before shields could react. Laser batteries swept across hull plates, melting metal and destroying sensor arrays. And the missiles, each one carried an artificial intelligence that could adjust its trajectory in flight, making them nearly impossible to shoot down. Admiral Keth tried to maintain order. He gave commands for counterattacks, for defensive formations, for anything that might slow the human advance. But the battle had already moved beyond his control. The Zelthari ships were built for intimidation. They were large, impressive, designed to project power. The human ships were built for one purpose only: to kill. Ship after ship fell. The glorious Conquest, a heavy cruiser that had served for 800 years, broke apart under concentrated railgun fire. The Divine Purpose, Admiral Keth's own flagship, took a missile strike to its primary reactor and exploded in a ball of white light. The Eternal Victory, the Pride of Zeth, the Unconquered Sun, names that had struck fear into countless species, all reduced to wreckage in less than 2 hours. A few Zelthari ships managed to flee. They scattered in different directions, their hyperdrives pushing them away from the disaster as fast as possible. Of the 500 ships that had entered the human system, fewer than 60 escaped. The survivors brought their recordings back to the High Council. The footage showed the complete destruction of the largest Zelthari fleet assembled in 300 years. It showed human ships moving with impossible speed and precision, outmaneuvering the proud Zelthari vessels at every turn. It showed explosions and debris and death. Counselor Zeth watched the recordings in silence. When they ended, she spoke a single word. Impossible. But it was not impossible. It had happened. And now the entire galaxy knew that the Zelthari could be defeated. The news spread faster than light itself. Within cycles, every species in known space had heard about the Battle of Saul, as the humans called it. The mighty Zelthari, rulers of the galaxy for 12,000 years, had been humiliated by a species they had dismissed as primitives. The reaction was immediate. The Krix sent formal notification that they would no longer pay tribute. Their message was brief and carried an unmistakable tone of satisfaction. The insectoid species had chafed under Zelthari rule for millennia, their warrior culture suppressed, and their expansion contained. Now they saw an opportunity. The Diluvians petitioned to renegotiate their terms of submission. Their aquatic ambassadors, once meek and compliant, suddenly developed a backbone. They demanded reduction in tribute, restoration of territorial rights, and representation on the High Council. The Vorathi simply went silent. Their crystalline homeworld stopped responding to communications entirely. When a Zelthari inspection vessel arrived to investigate, it found the system defended by weapons platforms that had been hidden for centuries. The message was clear. The Vorathi were no longer subjects of anyone. The High Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in living memory, there was genuine fear in that ancient chamber. "We must crush the humans immediately," argued one counselor. "Assemble every ship in the Empire, 10,000 vessels. Even their weapons cannot stand against such numbers." "And leave our other territories undefended," countered another. "The Krix are already mobilizing. If we send our fleet to human space, they will attack our core worlds. We should negotiate, buy time, build new weapons based on captured human technology. Negotiate with the species that just destroyed our grand fleet. Do you understand what you are suggesting?" The arguments continued for cycles. Meanwhile, reports kept arriving. Human diplomatic ships had been seen in Krix space. Human traders had appeared at Diluvian stations. Human exploration vessels were charting regions that had once been firmly under Zelthari control. The humans were not waiting for the Zelthari to decide their next move. They were already acting. Ambassador Korin requested permission to make contact with the human government. He argued that information was needed. What did the humans want? What were their intentions? Could some kind of accommodation be reached? The council reluctantly agreed. Korin was given a single ship and authorization to negotiate. He departed for human space with a sense that he was witnessing the end of an era. The journey through hyperspace gave Korin time to study everything the Zelthari knew about humanity. He read their literature, listened to their music, analyzed their political structures. What he found was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans were contradictions in every way. They created beautiful art and committed terrible atrocities, sometimes in the same generation. They valued peace and prepared constantly for war. They were capable of great kindness and shocking cruelty. They cooperated and competed, loved and hated, built and destroyed. Most importantly, they adapted. Throughout their history, humans had faced challenges that should have destroyed them: plagues, wars, environmental disasters, political collapse. Each time they had survived. Each time they had come back stronger. It was as if hardship only made them more dangerous. The Zelthari had evolved in a stable environment, their society structured around rigid hierarchies that had not changed in millennia. They were powerful, yes, but they were also brittle. When things went according to plan, they functioned with perfect efficiency. When things did not go according to plan, Corin's ship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human home system. Immediately, he was hailed by human patrol vessels. "Zelthari vessel, this is Terran Federation Defense Command. State your purpose." Corin transmitted his diplomatic credentials. "I am Ambassador Corin of the Zelthari High Council. I come to negotiate." There was a pause. Then, "Ambassador, you are cleared to proceed to Earth. An escort will guide you. Please do not deviate from the designated course." Human ships fell into formation around his vessel, 4 sleek, angular craft that moved with the predatory grace he had seen in the battle recordings. Corin found himself studying their design, noting the weapons arrays, the engine configurations, the sensor pods. Everything about them spoke of efficiency and lethality. Earth itself was a revelation. The blue-green world hung in space like a jewel, orbited by hundreds of stations and thousands of satellites. Traffic filled the space around it: cargo ships, passenger vessels, military craft, construction platforms. The humans had built an infrastructure here that rivaled anything in the Zelthari core worlds. And the humans themselves. When Corin landed on the surface, he was met by a delegation of human diplomats. They were smaller than Zelthari, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes, their skin in various shades of brown and pink. By all physical measures, they should have been inferior. But there was something in their eyes, a sharpness, an intensity. These were not the eyes of a subjugated species. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," said their leader, a woman with steel-gray hair and a face marked by years of experience. "I am Secretary General Vasquez. We have much to discuss." The negotiations lasted for many cycles. Corin quickly learned that the humans were not interested in destroying the Zelthari or conquering their territory. They wanted something more complex: equality. "Your empire is based on domination," Secretary General Vasquez explained during one session. "Species either submit to you or are destroyed. We reject both options. We propose a third way." "And what would that be?" "Mutual cooperation, free trade, diplomatic relations based on respect rather than fear." She smiled slightly. "We have no interest in ruling others. We have enough trouble ruling ourselves, but we will not be ruled either. And if we refuse, if we continue to send fleets against you..." Vasquez's smile faded. "Then we will continue to destroy them. Ambassador, you should understand something about humans. We don't want war. We find it wasteful and destructive. But when war comes to us, we fight with everything we have. Your people have been dominant for so long that you've forgotten what real war looks like. We haven't." Corin thought about the battle recordings, the human ships moving in perfect coordination, the weapons that cut through Zelthari shields, the complete, systematic destruction of a fleet that should have been overwhelming. "What about the other species?" he asked. "The Krix, the Diluvians, the Vorathi, they are all in rebellion now. What is humanity's position?" "We support their right to self-determination. Every species should be able to choose its own path. If they wish to be allies, we welcome them. If they wish to be neutral, we respect that. What we will not support is conquest and subjugation. You are proposing the destruction of everything the Zelthari have built for 12,000 years. No, Ambassador, we are proposing its transformation. The Zelthari can remain powerful, they can remain influential, but they can no longer remain masters of all. The age of empire is ending. Corran returned to the High Council with the human proposal. He presented it as clearly as he could, explaining the terms and the reasoning behind them. The council listened in stony silence. When he finished, Counselor Zeth spoke. So the humans expect us to simply surrender everything we have achieved, to become equals with the species we once ruled. They offer partnership, Counselor, trade relationships, technological exchange, a place in a new galactic order. A place. Zeth's voice dripped with contempt. The Zelthari do not take places, we make them. The vote was close, but the result was clear. The council rejected the human proposal. They ordered mobilization of all remaining military forces for a final, decisive attack on human space. Corran listened to the decision with a heavy heart. He had seen what the humans could do. He had walked among them, spoken with them, come to understand them. This war would not end the way the council believed. The galaxy was about to change forever. The Second Terran War, as historians would later call it, lasted for exactly 17 days. It was not the battle the Zelthari High Council had expected. When the combined Zelthari fleet, every warship the Empire could muster, arrived at the borders of human space, they found the Terran Federation waiting. But the humans were not alone. Beside the sleek human vessels hung the massive hive ships of the Krix. Their insected crews had been waiting generations for a chance to strike back at their overlords. The Krix warships were older than human designs, but no less deadly, their biological weapons systems capable of eating through metal and flesh alike. Below them floated the elegant spiral vessels of the Diluvians. The aquatic species had spent centuries pretending to be docile, all while secretly developing weapons beneath their ocean worlds. Their plasma torpedoes were legendary among the species that had tried to conquer them. None had ever succeeded for long. And behind them, appearing as brilliant points of light, were the crystalline warships of the Vorathi. No one had ever seen the Vorathi fight. No one knew what their ships could do. The Zelthari had always assumed the crystalline beings were pacifists, too focused on their strange meditations to develop military technology. They were wrong. The Vorathi ships did not fire conventional weapons. Instead, they broadcast signals, frequencies that resonated with the crystalline components used in all advanced electronics. Zelthari targeting systems went haywire. Navigation computers crashed. Communication arrays filled with static. In moments, the proud Zelthari fleet was blind and deaf, unable to coordinate their forces or aim their weapons. The battle that followed was less a war than a dismantling. Human ships swept through the disoriented Zelthari formation, their weapons cutting down vessel after vessel. Krix hive ships released swarms of fighter craft that overwhelmed the point defenses of Zelthari cruisers. Diluvian torpedoes struck with devastating precision, their targeting systems unaffected by the Vorathi signal interference. The Zelthari commanders tried to rally their forces. Some managed to restore partial function to their systems, enough to fight back. But for every human ship they damaged, 3 more appeared. For every Krix fighter they destroyed, a dozen more swarmed in. The allied species had spent centuries under Zelthari rule, and they had learned to hate their masters. After 3 days, the Zelthari fleet retreated. They fell back to their core worlds, hoping that distance would protect them from this unprecedented alliance. It did not. The human-led coalition did not chase the retreating fleet. Instead, they simply advanced, not as conquerors but as liberators. World after world that had spent millennia under Zelthari rule suddenly found themselves free. Human diplomatic ships arrived before military vessels, offering assistance rather than demanding surrender. It was a completely new type of warfare. The humans understood something the Zelthari had never grasped, that empires built on fear are always one defeat away from collapse. When the subject species saw that the Zelthari could be beaten, their loyalty evaporated like morning dew. By the seventh day, the Zelthari had lost control of half their territory, not through conquest, but through abandonment. Species that had paid tribute for thousands of years simply stopped paying. Governors who had ruled in the Zelthari name quietly switched their allegiance to the new order. By the 14th day, the coalition forces had reached the Zelthari home system. Their fleet now numbered thousands of ships, not just humans and their original allies, but vessels from dozens of species that had joined the alliance as it advanced. Some were warships that had served the Zelthari Empire. Now they served those who had freed them. Ambassador Corrin stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominion, now the last flagship of a dying empire, and watched the Allied fleet take position around Zelthara. The planet that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years was now surrounded by the species it had once dominated. The communication arrived on the 17th day. Secretary General Vasquez appeared on the main view screen, her face tired but determined. "High Council of the Zelthari," she said, "the war is over, your fleets are destroyed, your empire is dissolved, but the Zelthari people do not have to be destroyed. We offer you the same terms we offered before: partnership in a new galactic community, equality among species, a future without domination." Counselor Zeth started to speak, probably to refuse again, to demand another battle. But before she could, something unexpected happened. One of the younger counselors stood. His name was Veth, the same family line as the admiral who had died in the Battle of Saul. He was barely a century old, still young by Zelthari standards. "We accept," he said. The chamber erupted. Zeth shouted accusations of treason. Other counselors demanded Veth be arrested, executed, erased from history, but Veth stood firm. "Look around you," he said, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Look at the fleet outside our windows. Do you truly believe we can fight that? Do you truly believe we should?" He gestured at the view screen at the human Secretary General waiting patiently for a response. "They defeated us, completely, and instead of destroying us, they offer partnership. When in 12,000 years have we ever offered such terms to a defeated enemy?" The chamber fell silent. "We have a choice," Veth continued. "We can die as conquerors, our species remembered only for the suffering we caused, or we can live as something new, something better." He turned to face the screen. "Secretary General Vasquez, I cannot speak for the entire council, but I can speak for myself and for those who will follow me. We accept your terms." The vote that followed was the closest in Zelthari history. But in the end, a narrow majority chose survival over pride. The Zelthari Empire officially dissolved on what humans called May 15th, and a new era began. The years that followed were not easy. Building a new galactic order from the ashes of conquest required patience, compromise, and constant negotiation. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Species that had suffered under Zelthari rule wanted revenge, and only the steady presence of human diplomats prevented several potential conflicts from exploding into open war. But slowly things changed. The Krix, freed from restrictions that had prevented their expansion, colonized dozens of new worlds. Their hive minds proved excellent at coordinating large-scale construction projects, and they became the builders of the new galactic infrastructure. The Diluvians emerged from their oceans to take a larger role in interstellar affairs. Their scientists, long suppressed, began sharing technologies that the Zelthari had never known existed. Medicine, environmental engineering, quantum physics, fields where the Diluvians had advanced in secret, now became available to all. The Vorathi remained mysterious, but their contributions were undeniable. Their signal technologies revolutionized communication across the galaxy. Their meditation techniques, it turned out, were actually forms of mental discipline that enhanced cognitive function. Schools teaching Vorathi methods appeared on worlds across known space. And the Zelthari, they struggled at first. A species defined by dominance had to learn new ways of relating to others. Many failed. Some refused to adapt, clinging to dreams of restored empire that grew more fanciful with each passing year. But others found new purposes. Their administrative skills, honed over millennia of managing an empire, proved valuable in the new order. Their ships, redesigned for trade rather than war, carried goods across the galaxy. Their culture, stripped of its supremacist elements, revealed depths that other species had never been allowed to see. Corin lived long enough to see the transformation. When he finally passed, 2 centuries after the war, he was remembered not as a servant of the old empire, but as a pioneer of the new order. His diplomatic work had helped establish protocols that prevented countless conflicts. At his memorial service, representatives from every major species in the galaxy paid their respects. Humans, Krix, Diluvians, Vorathi, and yes, Zelthari, all gathered to honor a being who had helped guide his people through the most difficult transition in their history. Secretary General Vasquez, now retired but still influential, spoke at the ceremony. Ambassador Corin understood something that many of his people did not, she said. He understood that true strength is not about domination, it is about cooperation, about building something larger than any one species can achieve alone. She paused, looking out at the diverse crowd. The galaxy is better than it was. Not perfect, it will never be perfect, but better, and beings like Corin are the reason why. The new galactic community that emerged from the ashes of the Zelthari Empire was unlike anything that had come before. It was messy, argumentative, sometimes frustrating. Different species had different values, different priorities, different ways of seeing the universe. Conflicts still occurred. Disagreements still had to be negotiated. But it worked, not because any one species forced it to work, but because all species chose to make it work. The humans, for all their military power, had no interest in becoming the new emperors. They had fought for a galaxy where every species could determine its own destiny, and they held true to that vision even when it would have been easier to simply take control. 50 years after the fall of the Zelthari Empire, a human historian wrote a comprehensive account of the transition. She titled it The Liberation of the Galaxy, and it became required reading in schools across known space. In the conclusion, she reflected on what humanity had accomplished. "We did not set out to reshape the galaxy," she wrote. "We simply refused to bow to those who demanded our submission. When we were attacked, we defended ourselves. When we won, we offered friendship instead of subjugation. These seem like simple choices, but they changed everything." The old order was built on the assumption that the strong must dominate the weak. We proved that assumption false. Strength can be used to build rather than destroy. Power can be shared rather than hoarded. Different species can live together in peace if they choose to try. The galaxy is still dangerous. There are still threats to face, challenges to overcome, problems to solve. But we face them together now, as partners rather than as masters and subjects. And together, we are stronger than any empire could ever be. The Terran fleet had arrived and changed the balance of galactic power, but they had done more than that. They had shown that the balance could be changed, that what had seemed permanent and inevitable was actually fragile and temporary. They had proven that a different way was possible. And in proving it, they had given the galaxy a future worth believing in. On the anniversary of the Battle of Sol, species across the galaxy celebrated, not the victory itself, that would have been mere triumphalism. Instead, they celebrated the peace that had followed, the partnerships that had formed, the progress that had been made. Human ships, no longer warships but exploration vessels, pushed deeper into the unknown regions of the galaxy. They were joined by ships from other species, each bringing their own perspectives and capabilities. Together, they discovered wonders that none could have found alone. The Cricks identified new life-bearing worlds, their biological sensors detecting chemical signatures that other species missed. The Diluvians mapped the deep gravity wells between stars, finding safe paths through dangerous regions. The Vorathi listened to the cosmic background radiation and heard patterns that hinted at intelligences beyond the known galaxy. And the Zelthari, their vast archives finally open to all, provided context and history. 12,000 years of records, observations, and accumulated knowledge, now shared freely with any who wished to learn. It was not utopia. It was something more valuable, a work in progress. A galaxy of species that had learned, through war and negotiation and countless small choices, to live together. The humans had arrived as newcomers, dismissed as primitives by those who should have known better. They had fought when they had to, with a ferocity that shocked their enemies. But when the fighting ended, they had shown that they could be something more than warriors. They could be partners. They could be friends. They could be the species that proved once and for all that the galaxy was big enough for everyone. And that, perhaps, was their greatest victory of all.